What's up, everybody? I just come up with listening tips part two. So let's let's remember some points that we dealt with before about listening tips in part one. It's about the practical techniques, the practical tips we need to stay focused on. If you have if you have the intention, if you have the plan to be good at listening, there are lots of tips we need to stay focused on. So we did you know active listening and listening practice repetition. Repeated listening practice was what the point we discussed earlier. Today we're gonna talk about another tip which is very practical if you have the interest to do our best in listening practice, right? So today we are going to look at what the shadowing technique is all about and the benefit it has on listening practice. We're gonna talk about it in detail, right? Right? So what's a shadowing technique? We need to define what a shadowing technique is all about. It's a practical way of, developing our listening skill, developing our listening performance. It's a practical technique, a practical, you know, strategy used to improve our listening capability, right? So we're gonna take a look on how the shadowing techniques works where, right? A lot of people don't know what the shadowing technique is all about and not trying to use it practically with the intention of bringing about a kind of improvement on listening skill, right? So, as I have already mentioned from the very beginning, shadowing technique is a powerful language learning method where you listen to audio and repeat it immediately. Listening audio and repeating immediately is the shadowing technique, right? It's a kind of miming. It's a kind of a miming technique. We listen to the native speakers and we try to mime it and we try to repeat it in the same way, except as soon as possible. We need to repeat it immediately, right? We don't need to make a pause between, right? We are expected to repeat it immediately when the native speakers utters, right? When the native speakers utter, we need to repeat it in the same way. We need to mime it immediately. That's what the shadowing technique. You see how practical it is. It's very recommendable, by the way. In the process of listening practice, using the shadowing technique is so much recommendable because it's very practical. It's a powerful way of learning the language where you listen the audio and repeat it immediately. So that's the way how we are, and a way to use it practically with the intention of improving, developing our listening skill, right? This is the topic we're going to talk about right away, right? It's a practical strategy. It's a practical technique that a lot of people are trying to use the shadowing technique because it's very practical. What, in whatever skill we're talking about, feasibility works well. Feasibility is recommendable. We need to make everything feasible. We need to make everything practical. Unless you do that, thinking about fluency is beyond the possible. So we have to think over it first. We have to think over the way how we can use the shadowing technique in a very practical way. So if you are in a way to do that, if you are in a way to use the shadowing technique in a feasible way, it's possible to get closer to fluency as far as listening is concerned. So we're gonna check what the shadowing technique is all about. It's a practical way of learning language. It's a practical way of improving our listening skill. It works well in listening, by the way, right? The shadowing technique works well in listening because it's the way how we can listen the native speakers and trying to mime it, trying to repeat it in the same way as immediately as possible, right? That's the point. So it works well, by the way. Why we need to have the shadowing technique? Because it's very practical. It's very helpful to be good at pronunciation, right? It can also build our speaking confidence as we are, right? It helps us to be rich in vocabulary as we are. So it has a multi-faced function. That's why we always recommended. We language learners are strongly recommended to use the shadowing technique for improving our listening performance, right? Unless we are not trying to use it in a very practical way, we are not able to bring about a kind of improvement on our listening competency and our listening performance. So the shadowing technique works well in listening because it helps us to speak as natural as the native speakers. It can also build our speaking confidence. It is a good way of improving our pronunciation as well. It helps us also to be rich in vocabulary, right? So it's very helpful, very helpful by itself. It also improves our fluency and our rhythm as well. To be good at rhythm, to be good at fluency, to be good at pronunciation, to be good at intonation and whatever it is, we need to have the shadowing technique all the time. So we should have the inspiration, the way how we can use the shadowing technique in a very practical way, because it's very helpful to be good at fluency, to be good at speaking, to be good at listening as well, right? So it can have also the power to build our confidence, our speaking confidence, right? It's very helpful to be good at pronunciation as well. If you are good at pronunciation, we can understand what the native speakers are uttering, right? What we can understand what's really going on there in the movie we're watching, or in the listening activity we are engaging on. If you are not trying to use the shadowing technique, thinking about perfection in listening is completely impossible. So we need to have the kind of dedication. We need to put a big effort the way how we can use the shadowing technique with the intention of, coming closer to, fluency in listening. So we need to use the shadowing technique because it's very practical, it's very feasible, and it's very helpful to be good at pronunciation, very helpful to be good at vocabulary as well. It can have also the power to build our confidence, our speaking confidence. So that's why we always suggested to use the shadowing technique with the intention of, getting closer to fluency in listening. So unless we do that, unless we're not trying to use the shadowing technique every day as we are expected, right? It's not possible to get closer to fluency as far as listening is concerned. So this is the one that we have to stay focused on. This is the one that we have to stress on because it works well in language learning, in practical language learning, technical listening in particular. So we need to understand we need to think over the way how we can use the shadowing technique in a very practical way, with the intention of, if you have the plan to be good at pronunciation, if you have the plan to be good at vocabulary, to build the kind of confidence on our speaking, we need to rehearse it all the time. We need to use the shadowing technique in a very practical way, right? Practicality works well. You know what? Feasibility works well in language learning, by the way. We need to make everything feasible. We need to make everything practical. Unless you do that, thinking about perfection in whatever way is completely impossible. So we have to think on the way how we can use, the appropriate strategy. We need to be technical, by the way. We need to be strategic. Unless we are not trying to use the right strategy for improving our skill, you know what? We are not able to improve it. We are not able to scale it up. We are not able to develop our skills in general unless we are trying to use the right technique for the right skill, right? Truly speaking, we are not expected to use the same situation for every skill because it's going to be different, because you know what? We need to be situational from the very beginning. You know what? Unless we are not trying to use the right situation, the right technique for improving our skills, you know what? We are not able to get closer to fluency in whatever skill we are talking about, right? That's the point when you stay focused on. The shadowing technique is the most recommendable technique that we have to use, that we have to apply practically in our everyday listening practice, right? If you are in a way to do that, it helps us to speak naturally. It helps us to be natural, just like the native speakers, because it helps us to be good at pronunciation. It helps us to be good at accent as well. We can understand the accent of the native speakers if you are capable of using the shadowing technique. It helps us to be good at accent-wise as well. There are lots of accents basically used globally nowadays. So if you are trying to use the shadowing technique, you can understand their accent as easy as we can. So it has a multi-faced function, as I have already mentioned from the very beginning. That's why we all are strongly advised to use the shadowing technique. If you have the passion to do that, if you have the passion to develop our listening competency, we need to have this shadowing technique all the time. This is my recommendation that I would like to forward to you so far, the way how we can get closer to fluency in listening, right? So I just recommend you to do that. I just recommend you to do the shadowing technique in a visible way, in a practical way. So if you are in a way to do that, you will be good at listening. You can understand what's really going on there in the movie, because it helps us to be well aware of the pronunciation basically used by the native speakers. It helps us to be good at pronunciation as well. It helps us to be good at vocabulary as well, right? If you are rich in vocabulary, we can speak as fluently as we can. Because if you don't have sufficient words inside, if you don't have sufficient words in our mind, we are not expected to express what we are expected to do so far, right? Definitely. So the shadowing technique is the one that we have to use all the time if you have the interest to improve our listening competency, because it has multi-faced functions by itself. This is listening tips part 2 for you, and next time I'll just come up with another tips for listening. Keep it at you soon, everybody.